Chapter 101. You Want My Treasure? Ite. Long before humans first set foot on this land, a beautiful and prosperous elven city-state once stood here. At its heart was the palace of King Maglor. Then, one day, the city's people began dying in great numbers for reasons no one could explain. According to legend, Maglor felt his own death approaching and cast a spell so powerful the earth opened and swallowed the whole city, sealing it away to protect it from desecration. Thus was born the legend of the treasure of the elven city-state, Itai. "Is that Itai?" Professor Grog whispered. Standing on a rise, he peered down at the ruins clustered at the bottom of a wide, crater-like basin. Most human towns were built over elven ruins, but to find an unexplored site this deep in the wilderness was astonishing. The stone structures below could be missed easily from ground level. The basin hid them unless you had a vantage point. Itai's history was fragmentary. No survivors, no continuous records. All that remained were scattered references in the chronicles of other elven realms. For 2 or 3 decades, Professor Grog had combed through every mention at Oxenfurt University, piecing together the fragments. From those scraps, he concluded the ruins were likely somewhere in the remote wilderness northeast of Oxenfurt. He had not been certain, far from it. At Oxenfurt, more than half the faculty in history and elven culture scoffed at his work. Official records are the only real proof, they said. Without them, Itai must be a myth, and there could be no legendary treasure. The rest of the skeptical professors agreed Itai existed, but argued Professor Grog's proposed location was wrong. Too far south, they said. Itai should be north, perhaps near Eredin's Valley of Flowers, which they speculated might even be the city's successor. Even his students offered no unconditional support. So this trip had been a trial. Grog had been anxious every day, under enormous pressure. To find the ruins now, visible at the basin's bottom, was a relief he could finally feel in his bones. He had found Itai. Twilight settled as Professor Grog and the small expedition watched, tense and expectant. Even though they could not pin down when Itai had sunk into the earth, caution dictated a careful approach. Grog asked Linn, the witcher they'd hired, to scout ahead and confirm there was no immediate danger before any workers began excavation. He did not belong to the sort of scholar who treats laborers like expendable tools. If there was any risk, he did not want people injured. Linn had no objections. He had accepted the job aware of the dangers. In ancient ruins, the greatest hazards were traps and old mechanisms, exactly the kind of threats a witcher's enhanced senses were built to detect and counter. He circled the ruined complex first, alert for anything that might trigger at a distance. Finding nothing, he advanced toward the structures. As he approached, the ruin's true nature came into focus. It was not a whole city, but a palace, or rather, a portion of one. Once white stone walls bore deep grooves and the patina of time. Moss and vines had crept over the steps. Embedded at the foot of those steps was a massive iron door, heavily rusted and marked by the weight of years. Linn paused. His witcher senses gave him nothing. No warning of life, no thrum of magic. The wolf school medallion at his chest hung limp, giving no pull. Still, he prepared. He laid a Quen shield over himself, setting a defensive bubble against unexpected attack. On the ground, he set an Ard trap. In the hands of a trained signs user, Ard could be adapted not only to shove and slow, but also to blunt mechanical projectiles. Finally, he swallowed a high-grade swallow potion, so that if a trap pierced his defenses and he bled, the elixir would staunch the wound and speed his recovery. Prepared, he set both hands to the iron door. It was indeed as heavy as it looked. He strained and pushed until the hinges groaned. No traps triggered, no hidden bolts snapped. When the heavy door finally opened, it revealed a gloomy corridor that seemed to drink the daylight. No sign of danger outside. Inside, it's another story, Linn muttered. He found 2 large boulders nearby and wedged them so the iron door would stay open. He did not rush in. Instead, he signaled back to the waiting group in the safe zone. Professor Grog, his students, and the workers bearing spades and crowbars hurried over at the signal. They crowded to the lip of the passage and stared at the architecture, weathered, yes, but still showing the grandeur of its original design. Behind the iron door, the dark hallway drew them with equal parts awe and dread. Chapter 102. If you want, we can give you all of them. Go find them. They didn't rush through the passage behind the massive iron gate. Instead, the group set up camp on the ridgeline above the ruins to rest and recover. Professor Grog was itching to go inside at once, but Linn stopped him. Setting aside the obvious dangers, even a tomb sealed underground for who knew how many years needed to be aired out before anyone went in. This place had been buried and unopened for an unknown time. The air inside could be foul. Even witchers, who were relatively resistant to disease, needed to breathe. Ordinary people like Professor Grog and his students needed it even more. Under Linn's reasoning, the flushed, excitable professor gradually calmed. He had to admit Linn was right, and so he swallowed his eagerness for the moment. The students, however, were every bit as excited as their teacher. Grog's reputation had been questioned before. Some of his students had transferred away, others had given up on his prospects. Those who remained had little faith or loyalty beyond circumstance. Now, the existence of the elven castle Itei made the legendary treasure of the Elven King suddenly plausible. Anyone who returned with proof of such a find would become the toast of Oxenfurt University. As the days dragged on, every minute felt long and unbearable for the professor and his pupils. They couldn't sit still, couldn't stand still. Even sleep seemed to desert them. Linn insisted on waiting at least a few days before examining the interior, so they all had to remain on the surface, bored and restless. Each night, the professor and his students stayed up late. They woke in the mornings with deep, dark circles beneath their eyes. Linn and the hired workers, by contrast, were calm. Linn didn't worry. He was the one who would be going in, so whether they began now or later made little difference to him. As for the laborers, they were on fixed wages. Treasures inside wouldn't change their pay. Idle was fine by them. A week after arriving, Professor Grog could no longer stand it. He had tried to persuade Linn several times over the past few days, but Linn had always told him to be patient. Today, Grog resolved he would convince him to begin the exploration. He stepped into Linn's tent. Before he spoke, he was taken aback by Linn's expression. "Professor, you've come at a good time. I was just about to look for you." Linn returned an empty potion bottle to its pouch with a faint smile. "I think it's time to go in and have a look. What do you think?" Grog's prepared arguments evaporated. He nodded too quickly, as if afraid Linn might change his mind. After a moment's hesitation, he forced the question that had been gnawing at him. "May I come down with you?" Linn slung his sword over his shoulder and gave him a sideways look. "Professor Grog, this ruin isn't going anywhere." "I know, but..." Grog couldn't find the words to explain the mix of pride and fear tightening his chest, so he stopped. "I promise I'll be quiet. I'll stay right behind you. If you tell me to go, I'll go. If you tell me to stop, I'll stop. I'll do what you say." Linn shook his head. "I'm sorry, Professor. I understand how you feel, but this is an untouched ruin. At least, since it sank underground, no one's been inside. Only the gods know what traps and mechanisms lurk in a place grave robbers never reached. If we run into real danger, I can't guarantee your safety." Grog bristled and pulled a finely made hand crossbow from his belt, thrusting it toward Linn like a child showing off a perfect score. "I don't need your protection, Master Linn. This will do." Linn let out a soft laugh. "Professor, that crossbow is decent against lightly armored foes, but it might not even pierce heavy plate. It won't be much good against monsters that don't die easily." He laid a hand on Grog's shoulder. "Listen, you found this ruin. No one can take that away from you. I don't think your colleagues at Oxenfurt even know you're here, do they? If no one else knows, what do you have to worry about? Besides, once I go in, I'll need you and the others to remain outside and guard our retreat. Your role is important, Professor. Understand what I mean?" Grog was silent for a long moment. Finally, he lowered his head. "I understand. I'll leave it to you, Master Linn." In the empty passage, only heavy footsteps echoed. Linn walked over the marble floor with his masterwork silver sword at his side and a pickaxe strapped to his back. He didn't light a torch. The superior cat potion in his system let him see clearly enough by its own pale, afforded light. The walls were carved with exquisite patterns. Oxenfurt might be a center of human art and fashion, but there was no denying that elves were masters at this craft. Their racial talents showed in every curve and relief. At the end of the corridor, he entered a chamber that resembled a tomb. In the center rested a stone sarcophagus, its lid covered in delicate carvings. In one corner stood a door-shaped stone fixture, not decoration, but an indoor teleportation gate. Elven ruins often had these, built not by sorcerers but by craftsmen to move people within the complex. The gateways were fixed to specific locations, unlike spell-based teleportation, where the destination could be chosen on the fly. The tomb was disappointingly simple. With nothing else to investigate in the room, Linn stepped forward and shoved the heavy lid of the stone coffin aside. Originally, Linn had assumed that, given the size of the stone coffin, the lid would be heavy. Instead, it was lighter than he expected. He pushed it off with too much force. It hit the wall with a clang, denting the stone, and finally crashed to the floor. He didn't bother wondering what the coffin was made of. His attention was captured by the gold coins, silver pieces, gems, and ornaments that filled it. "So much?" he breathed. Before he could climb in, his witcher medallion on his chest began to tremble violently. Instinctively, Linn kicked the coffin, using the recoil to flip backward and clear the area. The treasure inside ignited like paper aflame and collapsed into a misty white light that quickly filled the entire tomb chamber. A trap. Linn backed toward the entrance he had come through, keeping his eyes on the doorway as the white mist curled through it. He slammed the heavy pommel at the end of his silver sword against the stone. The mist looked insubstantial, but the feedback felt hard as a city wall. "Can't get out," he muttered. The medallion quivered with greater violence until it seemed about to strangle him. Without thinking, Linn lunged aside, and a huge stone crash landed exactly where he had been standing. The thing rose up, far taller than a man, bloated and grotesquely fat, with a green, fanged face and an ugly, leering countenance. Deformed wings sprouted from its back. "You are courting your own death, intruder," it rumbled. Linn stowed his master-level silver sword and took the pickaxe from his back. He had fought golems before and had gotten practiced with the pickaxe. One glance told him what this was. A gargoyle, one of those standard constructs used to guard ruins and tombs. In this world, they were a sorcerer's handiwork, granite or marble bodies given animation by magic. Axii did nothing to them. Igni couldn't burn them down. They were immune to most signs. Dimeritium, however, affected them. When used, it showed obvious results. Gargoyles' usual weakness was their clumsy nature. They were strong and slow. This one, though, didn't fit the usual profile. The bloated bulk dissolved into the air and reappeared in front of him in a heartbeat. Massive, marble-thick fingers, ridiculously fat and comical, snapped toward his head. If they connected, they could tear his skull open. The monster's speed was far beyond what he expected, but Linn didn't panic. He had been through enough storms to stop wasting time staring. He moved first, a quick right-footed retreat, his body following, then forward again. The superior blizzard potion he'd drunk before, entering the ruins, lent him something like bullet time, allowing his reactions to match what his eyes saw. The gargoyle's claw swept past his face. Seizing the opening, Linn closed in and struck. Clang! The pickaxe smashed into the creature's neck. Stone shards flew, sparks showered, and the head wound sank 2 finger widths deep before the pick stuck. The gargoyle showed none of the animated pain a living creature would. It only raised its fist to smash him. Linn's free hand slapped the ground. A circle of purple light flared up, encircling the gargoyle. Eredin, an arcane trap, snared its feet, and the construct's speed plunged. He did not waste the chance. He hammered at the gargoyle again and again. Gargoyles were made entirely of stone. They had no soft spots, only relatively weaker seams at the neck and joints. The only way to destroy one was to wear it down piece by piece. With the Eredin slowing it, Linn danced like an agile ice wolf around the monster, aiming not just for the neck, but for the joints that held the limbs together. After each strike, he shifted position, staying to its side and rear so the gargoyle would have to turn to face him, and every time it turned, he turned with it. A slowed gargoyle could not catch him. Minutes blurred. The construct roared, staggered under repeated hits, and creaked as if the mortar binding it could no longer take the strain. At last it crumbled like an old statue, blocks and fragments collapsing into a pile of rubble. A bright ball of searing energy, the creature's experience, condensed and surged into Linn's body. He felt it fill him, a hot, satisfying rush. Thanks to friends who voted with monthly and recommendation tickets. Thank you for your support. Chapter 104. Then it wasn't in vain. Among the scattered rocks, Linn searched carefully. At last he found a green gem, a gargoyle heart, the power source that drove the gargoyle. Useless to a witcher and unusable by ordinary folk, it was a valuable ingredient for sorcerers. Linn slipped it into his alchemical supplies and stowed it away. He returned to the sarcophagus. The gold, silver, and jewels that had once filled it had all turned into stones of various sizes. It was an illusion, he muttered. No doubt it had been a trap. Open the sarcophagus and the mechanism would spring, releasing the gargoyle to strike at anyone who disturbed it. Linn checked the rest of the chamber thoroughly. Finding no other traps, he stood before the teleportation gate. A teleportation crystal was set into the wall beside it, but after who knew how many years its light had faded. The crystal itself was intact and usable. It was simply drained of energy. He cast Ard and recharged the crystal. A faint glow returned. Linn felt a wave of exhaustion, but a bottle of superior tawny owl potion replenished his depleted vigor quickly. It worked. Let's see where the other side leads. He stepped through. After a dizzy, nauseous moment, he found himself on a broad viewing platform. Linn walked to the railing and looked out. Before him, stretching into the distance, rose a magnificent elven underground palace. Corridors and staircases, braided between great halls and rooms like a vast labyrinth. There's actually this much space. This'll keep me busy. Linn did not set off exploring immediately. He returned to the ruins' entrance and told Professor Grog what he'd found. The professor nearly fainted with excitement. An elven underground palace, even if the treasures had all been eaten away by time, would be a triumph for Oxenfurt University just for its architecture and surviving murals. Professor Grog begged to be allowed to explore with Linn. Linn refused. Deep, buried ruins held more than restless dead. There was a chance of insectoids that lived underground. Professor Grog would be safer waiting until Linn had cleared everything. Linn's main reason for taking the commission had not been profit, but to keep the professor alive. If Grog didn't come, Cayenne would kill him and his party. If Grog did come, and Linn failed to stop him from descending into a still dangerous ruin, then the whole expedition would have been in vain. Over the next week, Linn dove into the ruins daily. As he had expected, insectoid creatures, mostly andregs and kikimores, had made the palace their lair. Clearing them took time because he couldn't simply rely on alchemical bombs as he often did. Not out of fear of structures collapsing, but because the buildings and wall murals were precious. Professor Grog had ordered them preserved unless absolutely necessary. So Linn cleared the bugs slowly and carefully. That said, with his skill, the creatures posed little real danger. He also met the specters so common in old tombs. Specters were more troublesome than the insectoids. They had no physical bodies and could teleport at will. To slay them, he had to cast Eredin to force them into physical form, then finish them with his silver sword. While he killed monsters, he also explored the palace's rooms. In the elven armory, he found many rusty weapons and armor, and books corroded beyond recognition. The former were too fragile to use, and the latter would crumble to ash at the slightest touch. Only 3 things remained perfectly intact: 3 weapon diagrams, one for a steel sword, one for a silver sword, and one for a crossbow. Those would be priceless outside the ruins, but to Linn they were mildly interesting at best. He knew better places to find superior schematics and had no desire to copy them. After about half a month, most of the palace was cleared. Only the last room remained unexplored. Linn approached it on high alert. A faint magical glow shimmered on the door. That meant the chamber was protected by enchantment. In the past 2 weeks, most finds had been ruined by time, but if this room still held magic, its contents might be preserved. The possibility thrilled him. After all, returning to Kaer Morhen in winter with only 200 crowns would earn him ridicule from his wolf school brothers. Linn examined the door carefully. There were many ways to breach a magically protected entrance. He could smash it open, but brute force might damage whatever lay inside. He would regret that. So, after weighing his options, he decided to go back to the camp and inform Professor Grog of his discovery before taking further action. A magic-protected door? Professor Grog exclaimed. Master Linn, even you can't do anything about it? Linn spread his hands, helpless. I'm just a witcher. Clearing monsters and traps in ruins is one thing, but magic isn't really a witcher's strong suit. Professor Grog scratched his head. But I heard witchers are also good at dispelling curses. There's a difference between lifting a curse from a person and undoing a magical ward on a door, Linn said. To outsiders, it may seem the same, but in practice, they're different. Even after Linn's explanation, Grog sounded reluctant. There really is no other way? A magic-guarded door. Any fool would know there must be something worth protecting behind it. If word reached Oxenfurt University, they could bring in a sorcerer. But in these days, a sorcerer's status far outweighed a witcher's. 200 crowns would hire a witcher to clear a ruin. Even 2,000 crowns wouldn't always be enough for a sorcerer. And if the treasure inside was worth more than that, the Brotherhood might claim the whole elven ruin. History had examples of just that. Even the most respected Oxenfurt professors answered to kings, and kings often deferred to sorcerers. The gap was plain. Professor Grog did not want sorcerers involved if he could avoid it. Seeing the man's worry, Linn said slowly, I can't do it myself, but I have a friend who's a sorceress. She might be able to help. Grog's eyes lit up, then faltered. What about the cost? Linn thought about the sorceress's character. Even if she would come for nothing, he couldn't accept that. He had to offer an incentive. If there's treasure, she'll get a share. Professor Grog grimaced but agreed. It was better to give up part of a find than to hand the whole thing over to the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. Once Grog consented, Linn stepped well away from the camp so no one could overhear and produced a small, shimmering silver device, the sound transmission box Triss had given him before she left Novigrad. Following her instructions, he activated it. A surprised voice came through. Linn? It's me, Triss. Can you talk? Of course. I was just about to contact you. The reward I promised is ready. I was planning to come find you. Where are you now? Still in Novigrad? No, I'm not. I'm not calling about that, though. Good news about the reward is welcome. Linn told her everything. The elven ruin, the magic-warded door, Professor Grog's reluctance to involve the Brotherhood. Triss was quiet for a moment, then said, A magic-protected door, you say? I can come take a look. Even if it fails, the cost won't be too high. So you'll come? Linn asked. With Triss's help, success seemed likely. I will, she replied. But tell me, are we really taking only 2 shares of whatever's inside? If you wanted, we could slip away with a few more. Nobody would be the wiser. Linn considered the temptation briefly but refused. No, I accepted his pay. I can't betray that trust. Triss chuckled faintly over the line. What does it matter? Your employer isn't down in the ruin with you. How would he know how much you took? He trusted me. That's why he called me, Linn said. Besides, Professor Grog already promised to give you a share if we found treasure. That's fair. Money was tempting. If he were only a witcher, perhaps he'd have taken the easy route. But Linn wanted more than that. He wanted to keep his integrity, and he trusted Triss. She wasn't the sort to turn on friends for a few extra coins. Compared to some sorcerers, she was upright and rational. All right, Triss said with a tone that had neither reproach nor disappointment. I'll see you soon. Half an hour later, a portal opened, and Triss stepped through, still in hunting leathers. Before Linn could speak, she crossed to him and kissed him quickly, then stepped back. Your reward, she said, and pressed a finely crafted leather pouch into his hand. The pouch felt light, too light for 200 crowns. Still, Linn trusted her. He slid his hand inside, fingers brushing whatever lay within. After a moment, he realized what kind of gift Triss had given him. Thanks to friends who voted with monthly and recommendation tickets, thank you for your support. This is a runed pouch. It's been imbued with a permanent extension spell by a high sorceress. Even Dimeritium can only disable it temporarily. It won't render the pouch useless. The pouch is made mostly of dragon hide. Feel it. See how tough it is? Even blades won't leave a scratch. I was joking about taking a sword to it, though. It'd look awful if you actually carved it up. Ahem. Back to the point. The interior space of this pouch is roughly the size of a villa, and you can arrange the rooms inside however you like. That way, when you need something, you won't have trouble finding it. Triss stood with one hand on her hip, explaining everything to Linn with meticulous care. Linn didn't say a word. No one had ever given him anything so valuable. His voice came out hoarse. I don't know what to say. The sorceress smiled. Then don't say anything. Feel it with your heart and accept it with gratitude. Linn emptied the small pouches from his belt into the runed pouch, then fastened it on. I will, Triss. Thank you. He sounded solemn, and Triss's cheeks warmed at the simple words. A few minutes later, Linn led Triss back to the camp to fetch Professor Grog. After Grog personally confirmed that, if there was treasure inside, Triss would be entitled to a share, Triss had Linn take her to the magic-protected door. They picked their way through corpses and rubble strewn across the ruins. Half an hour later, they reached the door. Triss told Linn to step back a few paces, then murmured a detection spell. Linn waited quietly. It didn't take long before Triss turned to him. You were right to be cautious, Linn. This magic isn't for protection. Its purpose is destruction. The moment it's provoked, it triggers mechanisms in the treasury. When that happens, whatever's inside will be reduced to ashes. No wonder, Linn thought. In another timeline, Professor Grog and his group had only found 3 elven weapon blueprints in these ruins. Most likely Kaer, who cleared the place, had broken through the door with brute force and triggered the mechanism, incinerating everything inside. Linn wiped a non-existent cold sweat from his forehead. Can you disarm it without setting those mechanisms off? Triss put a hand on her hip, chest out in proud confidence. Of course. Who do you think I am? This magic is complex, but not beyond me. I didn't grow up a wild sorceress. I graduated properly from Aretuza. You'd be surprised how much Margarita, Kira, and I put up with under Tisaya when she was headmistress. But because of her, we know more than ordinary sorceresses. All right, enough about that. You didn't bring me here to chat. Give me a little time and I'll open it for you. Linn nodded. Trusting Triss felt right. Do you need me to do anything? No, just stand there. 20 minutes later, the magical light on the door shivered and collapsed. The glow shattered like glass and dissipated into the air. All right, we can go in now. Linn pushed the door open. It was much lighter than the entrance gate had been. He held his arm out and gestured. Ladies first. Such a gentleman, Triss teased. She stepped into the treasury and whispered a spell. A globe of light rose from her palm to the ceiling, bathing the room in a clear, steady glow. They both stared. 5 chests sat neatly in the room's center, brimming with glittering gold coins that overflowed onto the floor. Linn's first thought was of the illusion from the coffin he'd encountered earlier. Wait, Triss, check. Are these real or some illusion? Triss nodded and sent a detection spell toward the chests. They're real. No illusions here. Linn stepped forward and scooped up a handful. The coins slid through his fingers like water. For the first time that day, a genuine smile crossed his face. So much? Conservatively, this is at least several thousand, no, tens of thousands of gold. An elven gold coin sat in his palm. He weighed it. Elven gold was denser than Orn, roughly the weight of Novigrad crowns. Linn, if you change your mind, no one would notice if you pinched a handful, Triss said behind him, winking. Linn tossed the coin back into the chest and shook his head. No need. Let's call the others. When Linn led Professor Grog and his students into the treasury and they saw the sight, everyone fell silent. Even Missiel, from the noblest family present, had never seen such a heap of gold. These were pure gold coins, no silver or copper mixed in to inflate the count. Professor Grog swallowed hard, slapped his cheeks a few times to steady himself, and ordered his students to begin an appraisal. After they tallied the contents, they calculated that each chest held the equivalent of about 8,000 crowns in elven gold. The total treasure came to roughly 40,000 crowns. The number stunned everyone, even Triss. 40,000 crowns was no small fortune. Many a Temerian count might not command that much in private coin. The wealth of the privileged wasn't just money. If it had been, it wouldn't hold the same power. Their true assets were land and title, the influence tied to them, and the people bound to their domain. That's what made the privileged class privileged. On their land, they could invoke any pretext to assert their privileges and command those who lived there. That power was their strength. If they lost their land and their authority, what use was money alone? A noble without power was simply exposed, prey to other lords. That was precisely why he had never considered the tower ending for his V. Chapter 17. Children make choices. Adults want everything. Standing before the vast piles of elven gold in the treasury, it was impossible not to picture the former wealth and brilliance of the elven city-state Eredin. With heavy hearts and memories of the past, everyone finished dividing the haul. As agreed beforehand, Linn and Triss each received a share, 4,000 crowns in elven gold apiece. Professor Grog and his 3 students would split another share. One share was reserved for Prince Adrian, part of the arrangement Grog had accepted when Adrian became their sponsor. The rest was to be handed over to Oxenfurt University. They were not grave robbers who would pocket everything. Oxenfurt's rules stated that any find in a ruin had to be turned over to the university. Still, rules and reality are different things. The professors at Oxenfurt were learned and respectable, but they were not saints ready to give up their lives for research. Fame and financial security were not mutually exclusive. Only children make choices. Adults want it all. Besides, research costs money. Without funds, even the noblest intentions starve. As long as it wasn't taken too far, Oxenfurt tended to turn a blind eye. At Delacroix Estate, it was very late. Prince Adrian had not slept. He had expected Cayenne to report back long ago. This was his first time working with the famed assassin, and he'd chosen him for the job for precisely that reason. He'd given Cayenne only a handful of targets, some bookish professors and a group of laborers. With such an advantage, failure seemed impossible. To stop fidgeting, Adrian tried to imagine how he would use the treasure once it was secured. Before he could finish the thought, the sound transmission box on his table flared to life. He snatched it up eagerly. "Cayenne, did you succeed?" The voice that answered made the smile freeze on his face. "Your Royal Highness, what did you say?" It was Professor Grog's voice, the very man Adrian had counted on to be his channel, and that dropped Adrian's hopes like a stone. He had given Grog that sound box and told him to call as soon as the expedition was done. On the surface, it had been simple. Contact me when you finish. In truth, Adrian had expected Cayenne to eliminate everyone involved afterward. Grog's call would then signal that the job was complete. Now Grog was calling directly, and that did not fit the plan. Forced to compose himself, Adrian put on a careless tone. "Never mind. Professor Grog, your call, does that mean you found something?" Grog's voice came back, full of excitement. "Yes, your Royal Highness. The elven city-state of Itai is real, and the legendary treasure of King Maglor is here." Relief washed through Adrian. His sponsorship had seemed a gamble at first, but now it had yielded results. "Excellent. You didn't run into any trouble in the ruins?" "None, thanks to the help of a hunter-master who cleared out the monsters and traps for us," Grog replied. Adrian's ears pricked up at the phrase hunter-master. "You mean Cayenne?" "No," Grog said quickly. "Master Linn." Adrian felt the room tilt. "Only him? Cayenne didn't go in with you." "No, Master Cayenne was dead before he reached the ruins." Grog's words hit Adrian like a blow. "Dead? Explain. What happened?" Grog went on to repeat the version Linn had given them. It might have fooled Grog and his students, but it would not fool Adrian. He knew Cayenne's methods and temperament. He had ordered Cayenne to quietly eliminate the discoverers to avoid complications. He could not accept the idea that Cayenne had been slain by monsters while protecting them. No, the likeliest explanation was that Cayenne had failed in whatever attempt he made on Linn and was himself killed. The thought put a cold edge in Adrian's voice. "That's unfortunate," he said. A thin glint passed through his eyes. "Where are you all now? Are you still at the ruins?" "We're camped at the entrance," Grog answered without hesitation. "Master Linn is here too." Adrian tapped his fingers on the table, measuring the moment. "Very good. Since the ruins have been cleared, that hunter-master's task is done. Take 400 crowns from the share that was to be mine and give it to him. That reward was meant for Master Cayenne, but Cayenne is no longer here, and Linn did Cayenne's work. It's only right he receive it. Hunter-masters are busy. No point wasting his time. I will send someone to collect the share we discussed. And when Oxenfurt officially recognizes your discovery, arrange a time for you and your students to visit my estate. I will formally reward you all." Grog's voice wavered with gratitude. "Your Royal Highness, you are too kind." Adrian waved reflexively, then remembered the other party could not see him. No need for that. You did well. Take what you've earned. Professor Grog thanked him again, the sound of relief unmistakable through the box. Adrian set the device back down and let the silence of his study close around him as he considered the next moves. The spoils to come, the loose ends to be tied, and the mystery of an assassin who had met a fate unexpected even to a prince. Chapter 108, Times Have Changed, My Lord. The sound transmitter's light dimmed until it was little more than a glow. Prince Adrian's face darkened. He struck the bell on the table. A moment later, the door opened, and the old butler, hair perfectly combed and uniform immaculate, stood in the doorway and bowed. Your Highness, send 20, no 40 men to the place I name. Kill everyone there. Leave no one alive. Bring everything from that site back to the manor. The old butler bowed again. Your will shall be carried out. When the man had gone, Prince Adrian sank back into his chair. He still couldn't fathom how Cayenne had failed, but it no longer mattered. He had ordered Professor Grog to pay the Witcher who had killed Cayenne the final installment. He wasn't a Witcher expert, but he understood them well enough. Hired blades like mercenaries. Once the job was done and the coin exchanged, the Witcher would move on. There would be no need to chase after him, only to dispose of the unarmed professor and his students. It should have been a done deal. He truly did not see how he could lose. The next morning, Professor Grog arrived at the agreed meeting with a heavy sack of coin. Master Linn, this is your payment, he said, handing it over. So much? Linn didn't count, but a glance made it clear the sum far exceeded the 200 crowns they'd originally agreed on. This includes the 200 crowns we discussed, and the remainder, those elven gold pieces, worth some 400 crowns, come from Prince Adrian, Grog explained. This job was meant for Master Cayenne originally, but since you finished it, the money is yours. Linn slid the sack into his runic leather pouch without ceremony. Many Witchers never saw this much coin in their lives. Professor Grog rubbed his hands, as if wanting to say more but hesitating. Professor? Linn prompted. If there is something else, speak plainly. There is one more thing, Grog said with a worried glance. I notified Prince Adrian with the sound transmitter last night. His men are on their way. They should arrive in a few days. But I've heard some unsettling rumors about Adrian. Linn understood the half-formed fear behind Grog's words. He wasn't surprised. It had been part of his calculations from the start. He answered plainly, My companion and I will stay until you complete the handover. From the moment he took the commission, Linn had known this would not be a simple job for treasure alone. The professor's party was only likely to leave the ruins with 3 weapon blueprints. The elven gold had been an unexpected and much greater prize. He had always had his eye on Adrian's money. Under the circumstances, only one of Professor Grog or Prince Adrian could walk away alive. The share the Witcher was owed from the ruins was fixed. What mattered was the prince's savings, which he could take with a clear conscience. A few days later, Triss's eyes of perception alerted the camp. Someone was approaching, armed. Someone's coming, Professor. They're carrying weapons, she reported. Prince Adrian's men? Grog asked. Triss shook her head. I don't recognize the High Mao emblem. It could be Adrian's, but it might also be brigands. Linn suggested. Professor, have everyone hide inside the ruins. I'll go out and check. Grog's worry showed. Just you? Linn nodded. Yes, Triss will support me from the shadows. Professor Grog hesitated, then decided. No, Master Linn, you've done enough. This time you won't go out alone. Let my students and the workers take refuge in the ruins. I'll go with you. Whatever comes, we face it together. Linn did not press the matter. The two of them walked out to meet the approaching troop, while Triss melted into concealment where no outsider could see her. The soldiers arrived soon after. They wore helmets and chainmail, but bore no conspicuous house emblems on their armor or shields. When they halted before Linn and the professor, a bearded man who looked like their captain stepped forward. We were sent by Prince Adrian, he said. You must be Professor Grog. Grog inclined his head. I am. The captain glanced at the Witcher and raised an eyebrow. And this is? Linn, the Witcher replied short. I'm the Witcher assigned to protect Professor Grog. Surprise flickered across the captain's face for the briefest instant before he masked it. Master Linn, His Highness mentioned you. I thought you'd have left after receiving payment. Linn answered coolly. This ruin is in the wild. Monsters, bandits, anything might be around. The professor asked me to stay until you arrived. The captain smirked. People say witchers are heartless monsters. Seems the rumors are wrong. Linn's gaze drifted to the road behind the captain, where the ranks waited. Rumors also say that in 1,000 years, men will abandon swords and fight with sticks that fire bolts. They will invent a single-shot engine of destruction that can level a city, powered by nothing a sorcerer could muster. The captain snorted. Impossible. Swords decide wars. It was true 1,000 years ago, and it'll be true 1,000 years from now. For a long beat, neither man broke the silence that followed. The soldiers shifted in the dust, waiting for orders, while the ruins, silent and patient, held whatever secrets had brought them here. The captain, realizing the conversation had wandered, cleared his throat twice and glanced back at the two of them. Why are there only two of you? Professor, where are your students and the others? They. Professor Grog hesitated. He couldn't read the intentions of this squad. Something about them set his nerves on edge, though he worried he might be overreacting. He was about to answer when Linn cut in. Prince Adrian sent you to collect his share of the treasure, but you didn't bring a carriage, Linn said. How do you plan to transport it? The captain's eyes landed on Linn. Hunter Master, Prince Adrian anticipated that. The carriage team is right behind us and will arrive shortly. Linn smiled. So it's just a box of gold. Do you really need this many men? Of course, the captain replied evenly. The wilderness is dangerous. You never know what you might run into. It's safer with numbers. Linn let his gaze slide past the captain to the soldiers behind him. That's true enough, but why are your men nervously clutching their weapons? Don't tell me you're planning to silence us. The air thickened. The captain's smile froze and then slid away as his face went cold. He raised a hand. The soldiers behind him drew their weapons. Archers notched arrows and took aim. On paper, the situation was simple. A decisive numerical advantage over two. One a witcher, the other a scholar who couldn't even skin a chicken. The captain was certain the two were as good as dead. Witcher, he said, condescending. Your instinct is famed, but your brain seems lacking. If I were you and smelled danger, I wouldn't voice it. I'd play along, find a way to slip away later. Maybe that's why witchers are becoming rare. Linn never let the taunt provoke him. If anything, the captain had already removed his mask. There was no need for pretense. He reached into his runic leather pouch, produced a superior beehive bomb, and tossed it forward. When it detonated, there was no single blast so much as a storm of shrapnel. Metal and wood splintered everywhere, and soldiers who hadn't reacted in time were literally torn into riddled, howling messes. Bastards! Shoot! Kill them! The captain bellowed. Arrows hissed through the air, a deadly rain aimed mainly at Linn, with a few finding Professor Grog. At that range, the captain expected armored men to fall. Even with some protection, anyone hit would be crippled or dead. He smiled briefly in triumph. Then a ring of purple light snapped into being around Linn and the professor, and the arrows stopped as if they'd hit glass. Triss's barrier. With the sorceress's protection up, Linn calmly drew a bottle of superior blizzard potion and drank. Sorceress! The captain howled. But before his shout had finished, Linn was already gone from his sight, only a streak of black where he'd been. No one had expected the Witcher to be that fast. In an instant, Linn had closed the distance. A single, merciless flash of steel, a spurt of blood, a headless body kneeling before its severed crown tumbled and hit the earth several seconds later. Chaos swallowed the remaining men. Linn didn't pause. He surged for the nearest soldier, who was still reeling from their leader's fall, and split him open from shoulder to hip before he could react. The rest tried to circle and use their numbers, but they couldn't catch him. Linn moved like lightning, too fast to be matched by ordinary men. Any soldier who crossed his path didn't last a heartbeat under Master Wolf School swordsmanship. By the time others tried to close in from other directions, he had already slipped through the gap left by the man he'd killed. The archers couldn't track his shadow, couldn't aim quickly enough. The ground darkened with blood, and the survivors finally broke. A handful dropped their weapons and fled, panic in their eyes. One of them glanced back at Linn, blood splattered, not pursuing, and felt a flicker of relief. That relief was short-lived. From above, a fireball slammed down with searing heat, engulfing the fleeing men who had no time to react. They screamed and burned until there was nothing left to scream with. 40 infantrymen, whom Prince Adrian had counted on for the job, were dead, annihilated by the combined ferocity of the Witcher and the Sorceress. The whole thing was over almost before it had begun. Thanks to everyone who voted with monthly and recommendation tickets. Thank you for your support. Chapter 110. I'm so stupid, really. Triss stepped out of her hiding place. Linn, are you all right? Are you hurt? I'm fine. Perfectly fine. Thank you. She inspected the Witcher again and again, worry creasing her brow, until she was convinced he truly was uninjured. Prince Adrian's men didn't come merely to claim his share of the treasure. He actually wanted to kill everyone. Fortunately, Professor Grog had a premonition and kept us here. Linn trailed off. Wait, why do I get the feeling you aren't surprised at all? Linn smiled. No, that's not it. Actually, I find the whole thing quite odd. Triss gave him a suspicious look. But you're still smiling. You haven't stopped. Triss, Linn said, holding up his hands, we Witchers are professionally trained. No matter how absurd something is, we don't laugh unless we absolutely can't help it. He lowered his hands. All right. I won't tease you. This was within my expectations. Triss frowned. But how did you know? A charming smile curved Linn's face. Isn't it simple? Besides, I had the script in my hands. He coughed and cleared his throat. Let me put it this way, Triss. Many people can share hardships, but very few can share prosperity. If Professor Grog hadn't found anything on this trip, things would have been bad but manageable. At worst, Prince Adrian would have withdrawn his sponsorship and demanded the professor return some funds. But if, like now, an ancient ruin is discovered, and inside it a treasure left by an elven king, do you really think Adrian would be content with merely his share? I promise you, my lady, even if we save Professor Grog tonight, this isn't over. Prince Adrian won't simply let it go. Triss couldn't help but frown. Hearing Linn say that, she realized how serious the situation truly was. So he can only hide inside Oxenfurt University? Linn shook his head. I fear hiding at Oxenfurt won't protect him. Academia has no borders, but scholars do. Oxenfurt University might proclaim its neutrality, but those in power rarely respect such claims. During the Third Northern War, the university had been forced to close. Many faculty and students were conscripted into Redania's army, and the buildings were protected by soldiers. Books from the library and research rooms were auctioned off to raise military funds. The sacred halls of culture and truth, the cradle of science and free thought, no matter how many lofty titles it held, had to bow before the king's army. Prince Adrian, as the last scion of a fallen dynasty, might not wield overwhelming power, but sending assassins into Oxenfurt to kill a professor who studied elven history was well within his reach. Linn couldn't guard Grog 24 hours a day. Even without direct assassins, Adrian had other means. No one is without family or friends. He could threaten those the professor cared for. That is the wrath of the powerful. Even a weak noble is not someone a common scholar can safely offend. Unfortunately, Professor Grog had few options. It looked as if he were doomed. You knew this all along? Triss asked. You want to help him? Is that why you took the commission? What do you plan to do? Though they had known each other only a short while, Triss had a sense of Linn's nature. He did not take on things he wasn't prepared for. Linn answered casually. In my homeland there's a saying, if you can't solve the problem, remove the person who caused it. Triss's eyes widened. You actually intend to kill a noble? In this age, nobles were something like the heavens, their power derived from long-standing, unquestioned tradition. Even those newly ennobled through feat of arms had fabricated lineages arranged by learned men locked away in cramped rooms. To common folk, killing a noble simply wasn't an option. Linn, however, smiled without flinching. To me, royalty, nobles, commoners, they're the same. If someone stands against me, they must die. He understood the gravity of killing a noble. The question was why make that known? With the crude forensics of the age, it would be easy to leave no trace. Triss, I need your help, he said. Don't refuse too quickly. I'm not asking you to help me kill a noble. I want you to help me buy some things. Only that? Fine. Leave it to me. Triss listened to his list and, seeing how simple the request was, agreed at once. The two then walked back to Professor Grog. The professor had gone white when Linn began his slaughter. By the time Linn finished and there was no one left alive, Grog could no longer hold back. He doubled over and vomited. It was only after the Witcher and the sorceress arrived that he, with nothing left to bring up, felt a little steadier. He had heard dark rumors about Prince Adrian and had braced himself for betrayal, but the man's brutality still shocked him. "That bastard Adrian," he spluttered. "I thought he'd at most plunder the treasure. I never imagined he'd try to take my life. I'm so stupid," he went on, voice ragged. "I fell for him so easily." A scholar, even when cursing, could do so without much venom. His words were more breath than blade. Triss and Linn let him vent. When he had said all he could, Linn stepped forward. "Professor Grog," he said gently, "you're a scholar, not a noble. You can't be expected to understand the tangled power plays and schemes of the aristocracy. Thanks to the great sage for the reward." Chapter 111. The steel sword eliminates evil. The silver sword kills demons. Grog took a steadying breath and bowed to the Witcher. "Master Linn, thank you. If it weren't for you just now, I'd probably be dead." Linn inclined his head politely. "Since I accepted the escort commission, protecting you is part of the job." "Professor, now isn't the time for thanks or grievances. Have you decided what you'll do next?" he added. Professor Grog stared at him, still dazed. Prince Adrian's betrayal hadn't left him. "Master Linn, do you mean?" Linn went on. "Prince Adrian never meant for you to live. If you go back to Oxenfurt University alive, he'll hear the news." Grog's face drained of color. If you think hiding at Oxenfurt will keep you safe, you're being naive," the Witcher said. He stopped there, but the implication was clear. Grog broke out in a cold sweat. He could recite the names of elven kings by heart and talk for hours about their culture, but he knew nothing about slaughtering living creatures for food, and didn't want to. The thought of taking a life, even that of a chicken, made him sick. Now he was being asked to kill a noble. The mere idea made his legs weak. "You mean you want me to murder a noble?" he stammered. "I?" "Professor, you misunderstand. I'm not asking you to murder anyone. I only want you to protect yourselves." "And you wouldn't want anything to happen to your students, would you?" The Witcher's hint made Grog even more uneasy, and he had to admit the man probably spoke the truth. Kindness and benevolence were virtues the Melatella temples taught across the north, but Prince Adrian lacked any such scruples. Those who angered him, or who simply crossed him, tended to die in suspicious ways soon after. The thought that he might end up the next victim sent a cramp through Grog's stomach. He regretted accepting the prince's patronage. Obscurity and a lifetime of mockery would have been preferable to this. "What do you want me to do, master?" Grog muttered, head in his hands. "My students and I need your protection just to leave Oxenfurt. We can't kill anyone. Delacroix estate is swarming with guards. No one could sneak in. If we're caught, we'll hang." Linn didn't reply immediately. He was waiting for Grog to find a solution himself. The professor's thoughts, knotted and frantic, suddenly cleared. He remembered the rumors about witchers, the way Linn had cut down soldiers as if slicing vegetables, the treasure in the ruins. He drew himself up and spoke as calmly as he could. "Master Linn, may I ask a favor? It isn't a commission, just a request. You can refuse." Linn nodded. "Go on. Take the treasure that belongs to Prince Adrian. I don't think he'll need it anymore. Then I'll contact Oxenfurt and have them send people to take over the ruins. My students and I will become famous for discovering the lost elven site, and will be far too busy to attend to any rumor that surfaces a few days later about the death of a royal scion." "I have no taste for gossip," Grog said, forcing a dry laugh. "I won't repeat it, and I'll forbid my students from chasing it. If any of them brings it up, I'll punish them severely." "That's my request," he finished. "I won't ask what you plan to do, and you don't need to tell me. Just make sure Prince Adrian stops threatening our peaceful lives. I only want to protect myself." Linn studied him for a long moment, then broke into a grin. "I accept your request, Professor." He entered the ruins, took the chest that had belonged to Prince Adrian, and placed it into a runic leather pouch. Magic crafted by a high-ranking sorceress was indeed remarkable. The pouch now held wealth most people would never see in a lifetime, and a hall of rare alchemical materials, yet it felt weightless and didn't hinder the Witcher at all. He emerged and mounted Nidhogg. Triss rode beside him. "Aren't you coming with me? My portal can take people along." Triss dismounted, cast a spell, and opened the shimmering gateway. On the other side was a bustling market, not Novigrad, but Vizima, the capital of Temeria. Linn waved a hand. "No, if I can avoid it, I prefer to keep my feet on solid ground. Delacroix estate is close. It won't take long to ride there." Triss didn't press. "All right then, I'll buy what you need and we'll meet up later." She hesitated at the portal. "I don't understand, Linn. Doesn't this violate your Witcher code? Don't you Witchers despise assassination contracts?" Her voice drifted on the night wind. Linn laughed, the sound bright under the stars. "Have you heard this one, Triss?" "Which?" He looked at her. His eyes glinted golden in the dark. "Steel for men, silver for monsters. Thanks to everyone who voted with monthly and recommendation tickets. Thank you for your support." Chapter 112. Tonight, Linn joins the hunt. A few days later, Linn rode into a small village near the Pontar. It was already dark. Most houses were unlit, the villagers having turned in early, so his arrival went unnoticed. He guided his horse slowly down the lane, his gaze traveling along the walls and doors until, at the edge of the settlement, he found what he sought. A small Lily of Temeria emblem painted on the wooden siding of a house. Linn dismounted and walked to the door. He tapped lightly. When it opened, a red-haired beauty peered out, part scolding, part worried. "Why are you so late?" The Witcher smiled. "Have you been waiting long?" "A little, but it's good you're here. Come in quickly." Triss stepped aside and let Linn and his horse into the dim interior. She peered out the door once more, scanning the street, then closed it and moved through the dust-covered room. "Do you want something to eat first?" "Thank you." As if by magic, Triss pulled food from her bag. Fried eggs, steak, potatoes, something called luobu, and a large bottle of cold beer. Linn ate like a man who'd gone without for days. When he finished, Triss watched him with concern. "Want more?" "No, we have to ride later. Eating too much will slow us down." He waved his hand. "Did you bring everything I asked for?" "Of course." Triss produced more items from the bag, this time not food but gear. A fully enclosed helmet with only a T-shaped slit for seeing, a set of plain, unmarked armor, and the padded gambeson to wear beneath it. Linn took his wolf school medallion off, removed his standard school jacket, pants, gloves, and boots, and placed them in a runic leather bag. He pulled on the undergarments, strapped on the armor, and finally fitted the helmet over his head. "How does it feel?" Triss's voice came as a faint echo through the helmet. Linn drew Guire and swung it a few times to test his balance. "All right, it's not as awkward as I expected." Armor and leather moved differently, but he could manage. If he drank a superior Thunderbolt potion, the armor would feel even lighter, the potion's strength boosting his muscles. He didn't say that now. "Let's go." Delacroix estate sat between Novigrad and Oxenfurt, an ostentatious manor with bright lights even at midnight. Its outer wall was patrolled by teams of burly guards in fine armor, torches in one hand, sword or mace in the other, equipment better than most town militias could afford. A black shape crept up to the wall, like a snake in the dark, climbing the ramparts without making a sound. Moonlight revealed Linn as he dropped inside the estate. Triss had cast a spell on him before he entered, an enchantment that muffled footsteps and the clink of armor. The charm held as long as he remained unharmed, and it let him move through the patrolled grounds without alerting anyone. He skirted the main house, slipped to a side door, and eased it open into a corridor hung with paintings. A servant stood in an open doorway, pouring bathwater. Linn ghosted into the bath chamber, closed the door, and in one swift motion had his blade at the servant's neck. The man spun, saw only a shadow, then felt cold steel at his throat. "Do you want to die or live?" a muffled voice asked. The servant trembled like a beaten bird. "I want to live, I want to live. Please don't kill me." "Good. Then answer me, where is Prince Adrian?" The study was lit, but the mood inside was fraying. Prince Adrian's face had gone hard. Still no word. The old butler, hair all silver, stood before him, clearly rattled. "No, but, Your Highness, the Etei ruins are far from Delacroix. Even if they finished quickly, the return trip would take time." "That I know." Adrian's voice was cold. "But didn't I tell you to have them bring a sound transmission box? If the job was done, why haven't they contacted us? The old man opened his mouth and found no answer. Adrian's expression darkened further. Could it be they ran off with the treasures? Of course not, the butler protested. I chose those men myself. Aside from everything else, they are loyal to you. Humph. They had better be. The prince snorted, but the irritation didn't leave him. It should have been a simple operation. Kaer, their assassin, was well known and deadly. He would have cut down Professor Grog's men with ease. Then another Witcher had shown up and killed Kaer. The private soldiers they'd sent should have been enough to deal with a Witcher if they surprised him. A group of trained men can defeat a Witcher if he has no time to prepare or use potions. Yet there had been no report. The prince feared the soldiers might have fled with the pay. Gold makes loyalties slippery. A sudden commotion outside interrupted his thoughts. Urgent shouts and the sound of feet pounding as if the estate had been breached. Prince Adrien and the old butler exchanged a look. Confusion and surprise mirrored in both faces. Your Highness, withdraw at once, the butler barked. He was the quicker of the two. Without hesitating, he moved to a bookshelf along one wall and shoved a book halfway back. Rumble. The shelf slid aside, revealing a hidden room entirely invisible from the study. The room didn't lead outside. It was meant as a hiding place until any threat had passed. Adrien snapped back to himself and jogged for the opening. At that moment, the study door was kicked open. Linn rushed in. Seeing the prince and the butler entering the secret alcove, he understood instantly. This armored intruder was the cause of the commotion outside. Hurry, Your Highness! The butler shoved Adrien toward the hidden room, then drew a hand crossbow from his belt. Clang! Linn swung his sword, deflecting the bolt. He moved forward, grabbed the butler by the collar, and hurled him hard, enough to wedge him against the closing gap of the bookshelf. Ah! The butler cried as the shelf pinched him. Linn flicked his left hand and unleashed a master-level Ard sign. The invisible shockwave splintered the bookshelf into fragments. As pages fluttered and wood flew, the pale-faced Prince Adrien, who had been trapped in the secret room, was revealed. You're that Witcher? Adrien stammered. Bingo. Correct answer. Shame there's no reward, Linn said. He smiled behind his full-face helmet, so the expression was lost to the prince. Adrien stared at the Witcher's gear and rapidly understood the other man's position. He began to speak, fast and practiced. Wait, you can't kill me. I am Prince Adrien of the Haimao dynasty. If you kill me, you'll be an enemy of the whole Haimao dynasty. You'll be declared a regicide, wanted across the north. Not only you, your family, your friends would be hunted too. Of course, there's room to negotiate between us, he continued, trying a different tack. I don't know who hired you or who sent you to murder me, and it doesn't matter. What matters is we still have a chance to cooperate. Professor Grog must have told you who I am. My power is far beyond what you imagine. He rushed on, offering ranks and riches. Hunting monsters is beneath you. Serve me. I'll make you captain of my guard. Regular pay, caviar and strawberries for breakfast, lobster for lunch, daily baths, physician's attendance, anything you want, ask and it will be provided. What do you say? He poured out his offer in a breath, eyes fixed on Linn for a reaction. Linn's response, however, was not what he expected. Done? Linn said, voice flat. A bad premonition washed over Adrien. Witchers were not cold automatons, not like this. When Kaer had heard promises, he'd shown at least some reaction. Adrien's voice became pleading. Aren't you overestimating yourself? If you kill me, you'll be an enemy of the Haimao dynasty, wanted by the north. Linn scoffed. Do you take me for a fool? Just because I'm a witcher and wield a sword, you think I know nothing of nobles, kingdoms, politics? You are the last of the Haimao line, he said sharply. If I kill you, the dynasty ends. Who would pursue me for a dead man? As for the north, apart from Redania, who'd care? Even Redania, after they take this land, might issue a warrant for ceremony's sake, but they won't hunt me hard. Besides, why do you think I wear this helmet? As long as I don't use signs openly in front of living witnesses, who will know I'm a witcher? Cold sweat trickled down Adrien's face as he realized he'd misjudged his quarry. This witcher was far sharper, far more calculating than Kaer had been. Pride drained from him. His tone turned groveling. I understand. Please, one more chance. Tell whoever sent you that you succeeded. Leave tonight. Take your payment, and my thanks. I'll give you half my wealth." Linn's helmet hid his expression as he listened. Then he said quietly, almost conversationally, "Prince Adrian, you've got it wrong. Your life isn't that important to me." Adrian blinked, hope flaring and dying in the same instant. "But not having you is very important to me." With that, Linn's sword flashed. One clean sweep, and the prince's head fell. A faint, warm trickle of life left the corpse and into the Witcher. Linn opened his attribute panel and scowled. The experience was worse than what he'd get from a chicken. Worthless. Then he turned his attention to the secret room itself. It was small. In a corner sat two iron chests, one large and one small. He opened the large one first. It was packed with glittering coins. Novigrad crowns on the top, Temerian orens, Redanian farthings, and ducats from Cadwin and Aedirn. If there wasn't silver and copper mixed in underneath, then he'd truly struck it rich. "All right," he muttered, a grin apparent in his voice. Maybe the prince wasn't so useless after all. He slid the chest into his runic leather pouch. Then he lifted the smaller chest. It was light enough to carry in his arms, and that suggested whatever it contained couldn't be bad. He opened it and felt strangely pleased. Thanks be to fortune, he thought, and to those who'd supported him in ways beyond coin. Chapter 114. As long as I kill everyone who sees me, this is a perfect infiltration. Huh? Inside was not what he'd expected. A thick notebook lay there, its cover worn by years. The script on it wasn't the common tongue spoken across the continent, but Elder speech, the language of the Aen Seide. In other words, whoever had left this notebook had been an elf. Linn hadn't been taught Elder speech at Kaer Morhen. Apart from elves, only mages and a handful of scholars still used it. Most people couldn't have read a single word. He didn't let that stop him. He knew someone who could translate it. Satisfied, he dropped the notebook into his runic leather pouch, then made one last sweep of the secret room and the adjoining study, taking a few artworks that looked valuable. When he was sure there was nothing else worth taking, he left. He pushed the door open and found the corridor crowded with fully armed soldiers. "You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately," a voice shouted. "Where is His Highness?" another demanded. Prince Adrian's men were loyal and well-drilled. They had assembled in minutes. Guards paid well-behaved differently. If Linn had been an ordinary human assassin, he might have been trapped. He was not. He tightened his grip on Gwyer and stepped forward without a word. That calm unnerved them. One man after another watched a single figure advance into the ring of steel. 3 guards, unwilling to believe what they were seeing, charged. What happened next was over almost before anyone could fully register it. The corridor filled with the sound of wet, sudden violence. One guard's throat was split so the blood sprayed up and stained the paintings and the ceiling. Linn backstepped, drew his blade smoothly, and drove it into a second man's chest. The third came in swinging. Linn caught his arm with his left hand, twisted it hard. The scream that followed echoed down the hall as the limb buckled grotesquely, bones protruding from torn flesh. Linn dragged Gwyer across the man's neck. The scream cut off. Thick blood soaked into the carpet, leaving a vivid stain. Kill them!" the captain roared. More boots thundered down the corridor. Men threw themselves at him, shouting, reckless. The strength gap was brutal. Linn cut them down with the economy of a practiced killer. One guard with a halberd lunged. Linn parried, and the blade struck the man's face with such force it left him stunned and broken. "Archers, bring me your bows. Shoot him!" the captain barked. 2 archers raised their bows with shaking hands. Their arrows went wide, one into the wall, another into the ceiling. "Idiots! Get closer before you shoot," the captain snapped, furious. He kicked one archer aside, seized the bow, notched an arrow, took aim. Linn swung Gwyer once. The arrow struck the blade with a clear ping and ricocheted upwards, spinning away before finally falling back to the floor. "Protect me! Quick! Protect me!" the captain rasped. Then horror replaced the captain's fury. His men were no longer advancing. They were slipping backward, retreating like a broken tide. Before he could curse, the black blur that was Linn struck him. The captain raised his sword, but the blade cracked like wood. Gwyer split the longsword and, with brutal follow-through, buried itself in the captain's shoulder, almost cleaving him in 2. "He killed Kenmand," someone shouted. "Charge! Everyone, charge!" another called, but his voice had no purchase. The remaining men collapsed into flight. Those who had shouted for a joint charge now fled in panic. Linn didn't give them time to hope. Fear had already done his job. He didn't need signs. Clad in armor, the soldiers couldn't outrun him. He moved through them, slashing and stabbing, until none of them remained alive outside the Delacroix estate. When it was over, Linn wiped blood and fat from Goyer on the bodies, vaulted the wall, and melted into the night. "You succeeded?" Triss asked when he returned to the small grove outside the estate. She stood there dumbfounded. His armor was spattered with blood. "Don't worry, it's not mine," Linn said with a casual wave. "Professor Grog won't have to worry anymore." "How did you do it?" Triss pressed, surprised. She had planned to go with him, but Linn had refused. Alone, his Witcher identity would be easier to conceal. Bring a sorceress into an assassination, and the Brotherhood of Sorcerers would inevitably take an interest. Linn had been confident he could manage without her. "It was nothing," the Witcher said modestly. "Just a bit of work." Chapter 115. It feels so good to be home. Wait, stay still. Triss leveled her staff at Linn and chanted a quick spell. For a moment, he felt as if he'd walked through a waterfall. A cool sensation ran over him, and when he looked down, the bloodstains on his body were gone. "That was a cleansing spell. Nearly every sorceress knows it," she said. "Thanks." They took a portal back to Triss's home in Vizima. What happened after that isn't for general telling. In short, the Witcher and the sorceress spent several days together before Linn finally left. Before he did, he took an exquisitely cut ruby from his runic pouch and gave it to her, one he'd taken from Prince Adrien's study. Even by a Witcher's standards, it was a top-tier gem. Triss, not surprisingly, was delighted. "This is beautiful," she breathed. "It suited you," Linn said. "Consider it yours." Her eyes widened. "Such a large gem. Must have cost a fortune." "It didn't cost me anything," Linn said simply, then added, "But you shouldn't show it off yet. Wait until things calm down." He hadn't mentioned the slaughter at Delacroix Estate, how he'd left no survivors, or the likelihood that Redania would move quickly to seize the estate and its lands. Better to be discreet. Triss didn't know exactly what he meant by, "didn't cost me anything," but she understood enough. She tucked the ruby away into her bag without a hint of disdain, and after a moment, opened a portal for Linn to Novigrad. Before stepping through, he handed her the elven notes he'd found in Delacroix's secret room and asked her to translate them. She agreed readily. Leading Nidhogg, Linn stepped out of the portal, not in the city itself, but in the countryside, just outside Novigrad. He halted and forced himself to swallow back the wave of nausea rising at the sight of the distant city walls. Though only a few days had passed, it felt much longer. In the city, he rode straight to a bookstore in the central square. Inside, the owner looked up and brightened at the sight of a man on horseback. Linn tied Nidhogg outside and went in. "Can I help you, sir?" the owner asked. "Do you have any books on how to get close to trolls?" Linn asked. The man blinked. "A Witcher, are you? Don't you lot kill monsters?" "We don't kill every monster," Linn said. "Only those that threaten people." The owner brightened at the clarification and led him to a special cabinet. A portrait of a male sorcerer hung above it. Below were rows of popular titles: Gilderoy Lockhart's Guide to Household Pests, the Gilderoy Lockhart series, Break with a Banshee, Voyages with Ghouls, Holidays with Hags, Travels with Vampires, Wandering with Werewolves, Magical Me, and finally, a red-covered book he handed Linn. "Here we are. That one should suit you," the owner said. Linn opened it. The cover read, "Shocking. Things you didn't know about trolls." The author, Gilderoy Lockhart, a recent best-selling sorcerer and Bannard Academy alumnus, according to the blurb. It wasn't shallow fluff. The book contained a surprising amount of information about trolls. "Good. I'll take it," Linn said. Books weren't cheap in this age, but Linn could now call himself the wealthiest Witcher around, so price wasn't an issue. He rode back to his villa in the upper district, pushed open the courtyard gate, and was barely inside when Cassia came darting out. "Lord Linn, you're back. Let me take that." He'd tried in the past to get her to stop calling him Master. She had refused. He'd compromised to Lord Linn. He let her have her habit. It was not worth arguing. He dismounted and handed Nidhogg's reins to Cassia. The horse was intelligent. It recognized her as his companion and followed obediently into the stable. The villa inside was immaculate, no speck of dust, proof that Cassia hadn't been idle in his absence. He had barely sat on the living room sofa when she came back in. "Lord Linn, are you hungry? What shall I make?" "Something simple will do. No fuss." "Yes, of course." She hurried off and returned quickly with a plate of breakfast. "What about your portion?" "I've already eaten," Linn said, though he reached for a piece of bread after a moment. Cassia stayed by his side, ready for any instruction. He noticed, with some approval, that she seemed brighter than when he'd first found her at Vivaldi Bank, still thin, but healthier overall. Her skin remained pale, though, and Linn's look made her uneasy. "Is something wrong? Is there something on my face?" she asked. "Do you get any sun?" he asked. "No, I hardly leave the villa." "Try to get some morning and evening sun if you can," he advised. She blinked but nodded obediently. He wiped the last of the sauce from his fingers with the napkin she offered and motioned for her to pull up a chair. "Don't rush off," he said. "Sit down. There's something I want to discuss with you." Chapter 16, Good Times. Only yesterday. Cassia straightened at once. "Lord Linn, please give your orders." Linn considered for a moment. "It's like this. As you probably know, I'm a witcher. Every winter, I have to return to the school's stronghold." A resolute look crossed Cassia's young face. "Please rest assured, Lord Linn, while you're gone, I will take diligent care of your house." "No, what I mean is, you should stay at Vivaldi Bank for the time being. We'll talk when I return." The Wolf School's custom required every witcher to spend the winter at Kaer Morhen. Linn felt uneasy leaving a child alone in an otherwise empty house, even in the safer upper district. If people learned a child lived there unprotected, trouble could follow. It wasn't about distrusting others' intentions so much as being realistic about human nature. Having Cassia under the watch of Vim Vivaldi at the bank would put his mind at ease. "Yes, if that's your decision," Cassia said. She was sensible and said nothing more, as if she could accept whatever Linn chose. Her obedience made the Witcher pat her shoulder before he left for Vivaldi Bank. In a private room at Vivaldi Bank, Linn and the dwarf banker Vim Vivaldi sat opposite one another. When Linn explained the situation, Vim chuckled and agreed at once. "No problem. I like this child, unlike most human brats. I'll look after her." "That's a great help. Also, Lord Vim, there's another favor I need." "Speak." "I need stonemasons, carpenters, and bricklayers. Ideally craftsmen with experience on castle work. The employment would be for a year and involves long travel." Vim didn't hesitate. He thumped his chest and grinned. "No problem. I know some good lads who fit that description, but I'm curious. Master, what do you need them for?" Linn smiled. "Sorry, Vim, that's confidential." "Ah, very well," Vim laughed. "I won't pry, but one thing I must settle first." He rubbed two fingers together. "People must be paid. Skilled craftsmen cost coin. Master Witcher, is your purse all right?" "No need to worry about that," Linn answered. The year's spoils had fattened his coin purse. The gold taken from Prince Adrian's secret chamber alone, once converted into crowns, totaled around 10,000. After exploring the elven ruins of Itai, he'd acquired elven coin worth another 8,000 crowns. Add the payments from serving Elder Brovar, Istrad, and Triss, and it all easily exceeded 20,000 crowns. Crowns were high in gold. Converted into smaller coin, it was even more. Linn wasn't naive. His luck had been exceptional. Most witchers didn't have such good fortune. Many worked for poor farmers or small towns, sometimes without full payment. After the cost of repairing silver swords, brewing potions, and making alchemical bombs, little remained. It was no surprise that witchers often lived poorly. The real reason Linn needed stonemasons and carpenters was simple. Kaer Morhen needed repairs. He knew Vesemir couldn't bear to abandon the old keep. Lambert had once joked that Kaer Morhen was as cold as a frost giant's backside, and he couldn't fathom why anyone would cling to the pile of broken stones. Vesemir, though, was different. Vesemir was older than most remembered. He kept a hat in his chest dated 1112, a reminder of how long he had lived. He had seen the Wolf School in its prime, halls full of clinking glasses, apprentices sweating on the training grounds, the forge's fire always stoked, the alchemy lab alive with the scent of brewing potions. Those were memories that lingered. Age made people cling to the past, and witchers were no exception. Vesemir wasn't living in denial or trapped in sorrow. He simply held on to what the school had once been. People need something to believe in. Perhaps Vesemir's dream was modest and parental at heart. He wanted his children safe and at peace. Linn didn't share Vesemir's dream in the same way, but he could protect it. Repairs to Kaer Morhen weren't only for nostalgia. If Linn planned to revive the Witchers in the future, Kaer Morhen, the school's home, would have to be habitable. Besides, fixing the keep would put an end to Lambert's endless complaints about the cold. If the place were warmer and safer, everyone would have a little more peace. Since the repairs were inevitable, Linn figured there was no sense in postponing them. If they had to be done eventually, better to start now. He only hoped that, with Vim's help and a few stout dwarf masons, he could give Kaer Morhen a chance to feel like a home again, even if the good times were only yesterday. Chapter 117, Friends Walk Together for Life. The next day, Linn returned to Vivaldi Bank. Vimy wasn't there. A foreign noble who had recently settled in Novigrad had invited him to appraise some artifacts. A bank clerk led Linn to the VIP room and mentioned that Vimy had already found the people Linn needed and had arranged for them to wait inside. Linn pushed open the door and stepped in. To his surprise, he recognized half the people there. The dwarf squad that had escorted Istrad's caravan sat clustered around a table, playing Gwent. Heads turned when the door opened, though the two men still absorbed in the game barely glanced up. The lead dwarf's face lit with surprise and joy. "Linn," he called. Linn's surprise matched his own. "Yarpen Zigrin, what are you doing here?" Yarpen laughed and barreled forward to give him a fierce hug. His companions, dwarves who'd fought and traveled together, quickly closed ranks around Linn. "Mr. Vim put us forward," Yarpen explained. "Said there was a good-hearted employer who needed folk to help fix up a castle. My brothers and I used to do this back in Mahakam." He glanced at the people behind Linn and then back at him. "So, that employer wouldn't happen to be you?" Linn nodded. "I didn't expect Vim would send people I already knew." Yarpen folded his arms and boomed a laugh. "Dwarves don't boast for the sake of it. If we're here, it means we're the best suited for the job, no question." He named his companions. "Lucas Cotto's the stonemason's son. Yannick Brass is a carpenter's son. Xavier Moran's father was a bricklayer. The Dalberg brothers, Polly and Regan, and I come from warriors, but give us a hammer and chisel, and we'll do the work better than most humans." "Since we've fought together before," Yarpen added, rubbing his hands, "I promise you this. If we don't do a proper job, you won't pay us. Sound fair?" Linn smiled. "All right, it's a deal." They clasped hands and Linn moved on to a second group. A dwarf introduced himself. "Hello, employer. I'm Zoltan Chevet, and these are my brothers, Munro Broyes, Figgis Merluzzo, Yarson Valda, Caleb Stratton." He paused as he noticed the last man. "And Percival Schutenbach." Percival wasn't a dwarf. Under his damp hood, no beard showed, only a long, pointed nose. The nose marked him as a gnome, a native of this continent. When Zoltan finished, Linn inclined his head. "Welcome. Good to have you with us, Mr. Chevet." The dwarves laughed, friendly and broad. "Too formal," said Zoltan. "Call me Zoltan, like you call Yarpen by his name. We're not elves, no need for all the ceremony." "Then call me Linn," he said. After a little more banter, Linn learned how Yarpen and his crew had ended up in Novigrad. After the escort job for Istrad, Istrad had tried to hire them on, but Yarpen and the others declined. They'd taken the gold Istrad offered and set off for Novigrad, because a big city with lots of traffic promised more work and less discrimination than back home. Every dwarf from Mahakam knew Vim Vivaldi, so after a few days drinking in a tavern, Yarpen's group found him and asked for help finding work. It turned out Linn had asked Vim to find stonemasons, carpenters, and bricklayers, so Vim had put them together. Zoltan's group had a similar story. They'd grown tired of Elder Brovar's rule in Mahakam and hadn't gone back. They weren't trained craftsmen in the human sense, but as Yarpen liked to point out, dwarves are naturally gifted at this sort of labor. So they answered the call as well. Yarpen's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "So Linn, tell us about the job. Where are we headed?" Linn nodded. "Have you ever heard of Kaer Morhen?" The dwarves exchanged glances. "Kaer Morhen?" Yarpen frowned, thinking, "Isn't that the wolf school's stronghold?" Linn had mentioned it offhand, half expecting blank stares. He hadn't expected Yarpen to know the name. You know it? More than that, Yarpen said loudly. I'm no spring chicken. I never went to Kaer Morhen myself, but I remember when there were far more witchers wearing the wolf medallion than there are now. His voice dropped. I heard later about the massacre, how rioters, no better than those who slaughter non-humans, almost wiped out the witchers in that castle. After that, there were fewer witchers everywhere. So, he asked, you want us to repair Kaer Morhen? Linn smiled. Yes. Think you can handle it? Of course we can, Yarpen declared. They fell into detailed discussion. Kaer Morhen lay deep in the Blue Mountains, so the wood and stone for the repairs could be sourced from nearby. Other tools and materials would be bought in Novigrad. Normally, that would require renting several caravans to haul everything up to the fortress, but Linn had a ruined leather pouch with room enough to hold the contents of an entire villa, so transport wouldn't be a problem. Plans were sketched, tasks divided, and the mood in the VIP room was one of excitement and resolve as old acquaintances prepared to set out together on the work ahead. Chapter 118. You are like an old general on the stage, with flags all over your back. It took several days to finally buy all the tools and supplies Linn needed. Watching the gold pour out felt like a stab to the heart, but someone had to do it. Money could always be earned again. If everyone died, repairing the keep would be pointless. A low morning mist hung over the Pontar. A barge plied the wide river. Linn leaned against the stern rail and watched the wake spread and fade. They'd left Novigrad several days ago and were soon to pass the Freeport trade station in the river's middle reaches. Yarpen and Zoltan were below in the cabin. Life aboard the barge was dull. Even Gwent, the dwarves' favorite pastime, had worn thin after day of the same hands. They'd complained more than once. If only a magic carriage existed that would deliver you to your destination as soon as you climbed in, they joked. Unfortunately, such wonders didn't belong to this world. The dwarves, therefore, comforted themselves by trying to sleep through the trip. The Witcher preferred the deck. Unless it was time to sleep, the cabin's scents were unbearable to a Witcher's sharpened senses. Linn watched the ripples on the water and thought. The Pontar didn't lead directly to Kaer Morhen. Like the Yaruga to the south, the Pontar rose in the Blue Mountains, but Kaer Morhen lay farther north and deeper in those ranges. Once they disembarked, they'd still have to cross Cadwyn to reach it. King Henselt of Cadwyn had little patience for non-humans. He certainly wouldn't welcome a dwarf entourage, especially one led by a witcher. Linn could almost picture the king's fury. He'd planned for this, though. Before leaving Novigrad, he'd bought enough provisions to feed the party on the road, and intended to keep to routes far from villages and towns while passing through Cadwyn to avoid trouble. He'd even thought about asking Triss to open a portal straight to Kaer Morhen. A direct leap would be ideal, but a sound transmission box had reminded him how naive that idea was. Teleporting a large company demanded more than raw magic. It required many casting materials, and portals could only be opened to places the sorceress had herself visited. Sending people to a place she'd never set eyes on risked disaster. Triss might have heard of Kaer Morhen, but she'd never been there. Asking her to travel away for an entire winter would be impossible. King Foltest would never grant such leave. The mist's thick. Best time for a surprise attack, wouldn't you say, Master Hunter? The barge's captain had come up behind him. It was luck or coincidence, the same man who had captained the route from Novigrad to Targor County the last time Linn had traveled it. Forgive me for not introducing myself then, the captain said. Name's Losley. Linn, the Witcher answered, nodding. Losley took his hand, held it a moment, then asked something that made Linn give a faint look of surprise. Which school are you from? You know about that? Linn raised an eyebrow. If you've met as many sorts as I have, you pick up a thing or two about the strange things in the world, Losley said with a laugh. Wolf School. Linn touched the wolf head medallion that hung from his neck. Losley seemed satisfied. As long as it ain't the cat school, the captain went on. I hear the cat lot are nothing but killers and madmen. Linn didn't answer directly. Well, as long as you don't hire them and then stiff them on the coin, you'll be fine. He changed the subject. Tell me about yourself, Losley. I remember you did the Novigrad Targor run. What brings you out here now? Losley understood the shift and obliged. Pontar's been restless lately. Restless? There's been incidents, barges that set out and never came back. Word spread and captains started refusing the route. He shrugged. So I take a chance and charge double. Linn blinked. Aren't you afraid you'll meet the same fate? I am. Losley rubbed his shoulder. But this is my last trip. When I get back to Novigrad, I'm done. Selling the boat, retiring. The coin I've saved will buy me a house in the lower district. Linn's face twitched, and out of habit, he spat into the river a few times. Losley, realizing his words had been inauspicious, spat too. The custom's superstitiousness might have seemed absurd to his former life, but in this world, a quick spit was cheap insurance against bad luck. Losley glanced at the company lounging on the deck, then back at Linn. But you, Master Hunter, every non-human seems to look to you. Where are you headed? You're not recruiting with the free children, are you? Chapter 119, My Axe Has Long Been Thirsty, Part 1. Linn answered without expression. That joke isn't funny at all. Good, it shouldn't be, Losley replied. These are strange times. Things are getting more and more chaotic. Hearing the meaning behind his words, Linn looked at him. What is it? Losley hesitated, then spoke with a trace of fear. A village near Hagi Fortress was attacked by a band of pirates some time ago. They killed everyone, women, children. No one was spared. Because of that, the number of barges traveling the Pontar has fallen off sharply. Temeria and Redania have both put more patrol boats on the river, but so far they haven't found anything. Linn looked toward the mist that lay over the river, thinner now than before. Do you know where these pirates came from? No clue. Losley shook his head. There've never been so many pirates on the Pontar before. A sailor came running up, panic written all over his face. Captain, it's bad. Why are you panicking? What's happened? There are ships ahead, many of them. They're blocking the way. Temerians? Redanians. The Pontar ran through 4 countries, Temeria, Redania, Aedirn, and Cadwin. Since their barge hadn't reached Freeport yet, they were still far from Aedirn and Cadwin. They were therefore in Temerian or Redanian waters. Both Temeria and Redania claimed the Pontar, and after long, bloody conflict, the two sides had eventually agreed to administer the river jointly. That compromise, however, brought its own troubles. Dividing a border on water proved far more complicated than any land border. Losley silently counted his blessings that the ships ahead weren't Redanian. 2 days earlier, he had had to pay toll to a Redanian patrol. If he had to pay again for the same cargo, he would be ruined. When the sailor confirmed who was blocking their path, Losley felt both relief and dread. Relief that he wouldn't have to pay another tax. Dread because the ships ahead were the notorious pirate crew stirring up trouble. Call everyone to the deck. Quickly, he barked. He turned to Linn, pleading. Witchers were skilled fighters, and Linn had a dozen dwarven companions who could swing axes. If they helped, they'd have a chance. Linn didn't need the plea finished to know what he meant. He sighed. Captain Losley, I told you not to make light of things. Don't worry, my companions and I will take part in the fight. If the pirates win, we can't simply stand aside. They rang the ship's alarm bell. Ordinary passengers scrambled below, hiding in cabins. The sailors armed themselves and gathered on deck. At the sound of the bell, Yarpen, Zoltan, and their fellow dwarves came up as well. Seeing so many non-humans on deck, Losley's men tensed and a fight nearly broke out. Hold, Losley shouted, panic and regret mixing in his voice. He had assumed calling in the Witcher's companions would help. He hadn't thought it might frighten his crew. Tension between Northerners and non-humans, while not as acute as during the First Northern War, still ran deep, especially in such unsettled times. Yarpen, Zoltan, tell your brothers to come to my side, Linn called from the stern. Both sides froze and then turned as Linn walked forward. Losley, your men take the bow. My companions and I will guard the stern. We'll work together, understood? That's a fine plan, Master. I agree, Losley said, too relieved to argue. He used the order to rein in his crew. Even as Linn led the dwarves aft, his sharp ears caught the sailors grumbling. Letting so many non-humans with weapons stay on deck, what if they're with those free children who caused the uprisings in the north? We'll be done for. They should have had their weapons taken and been locked in their cabins when they boarded. That's the only safe way. Losley's patience snapped. Enough. Shut your mouths. Is this endless? Open your eyes and look. If anyone's sword isn't stained with blood later, I'll throw him overboard to feed the water spirits." Yarpen and Zoltan, walking toward the stern, glanced at Linn's face and then broke into grins. "Did you hear them? Of course they're bad-mouthing us. There are always people like that, good at nothing but stirring trouble. We don't care. Our employer is you, not them. Our axes, and we fight for you. Linn, if you die, no one pays us, and that won't do." Zoltan punctuated the agreement with a loud, unapologetic fart that hit like a biological weapon. The offensive odor dissolved the tension. The dwarves laughed and jogged aft, taking up positions to guard the stern. Yarpen, Zoltan, and Linn stayed together. "You've been aboard this whole trip, Linn. Do you know what's going on?" Yarpen asked. "I heard it's pirates," Linn answered. "Pirates? On the Pontar?" Zoltan scoffed. "This is a river. Pirates don't only sail the sea," Linn said. "The Pontar and the Yaruga are major routes, plenty of river traffic. River pirates are a thing, especially in times like these." Zoltan spat twice into his palms and flexed. "Then let them come. My great axe has been thirsty for blood. 1 for 1, 2 for 2. Chapter 120, My Axe Has Long Been Thirsty, Part 2. Look quick, there's something on the river. A hazy mist smeared the night, blurring everything. Even the Witcher's cat-like eyes couldn't cut through it. He could only make out something flickering in and out of sight. "Everyone, down!" he shouted. Arrows hissed through the fog. A storm of them tore across the deck. Linn was ready. He'd already cast a master-level Quen shield and an Eredin sign on himself, and he was half-crouched behind the stern bulwark. The arrows struck the wood and fell harmlessly away. The dwarves fared well, too. Their height and low crouch kept them safe. The worst of it hit Losley's crew. 2 screams came from the bow, and the captain's frantic voice barked, "Get down! Quick, get down!" They hadn't even started boarding, and already there were casualties. Yarpen, crouched behind the bulwark beside the dwarves, called, "Linn, leave the stern to us. Go help them." Zoltan nodded. "We don't like how they spoke to us," he grunted, "but we're on the same boat now. If they all die, it helps none of us. With me and my brothers and Yarpen's lot, not a single pirate will set foot aboard," Yarpen promised. "Then be careful," Linn said, and sprinted toward the bow. Losley, pressed under the bow bulwark, saw the Witcher running to meet them and opened his mouth to shout. Before he could, grappling hooks thudded into the rail, teeth biting into the planks. "Cut the ropes. Don't let them climb," he ordered. Sailors jumped up and hacked at the ropes. Pirates fell, screaming, when the lines were severed and they plunged into the river. But while the sailors chopped at the remaining ropes, another volley of arrows rose from the mist. 3 men crumpled on the deck. Once more, the survivors ducked behind the bulwark and stayed down. Even Losley's frantic urging couldn't get them to show themselves. Then a dark blur flashed by. So quick it seemed a gust of wind. Linn arrived at the bow and met the eyes of a pirate halfway up a rope, a scimitar clamped in his teeth. The man let go of the rope to reach for the blade, but on a swinging ship, he misjudged his balance. He slipped before he could free the scimitar and plunged into the black water. Arrows tracked him, but Linn didn't dodge. A bright orange Quen shimmered up and took the shots. He swung his steel and severed the grapnel. The whole rope, with several climbers on it, crashed into the river. There were too many pirates. They came from 3 directions. While Linn held the bow, others were scaling the sides, and the stern was under attack too. But Yarpen's crew and Zoltan and his brothers were battle-hardened, men who'd seen blood. The dwarves stayed hunched until pirate heads peeked over the rail. Then they struck like hammers, axes splitting skulls. The stern became a slaughter. The pirates there were no match for the dwarves. At the bow, though, pirates who'd managed to climb both flanks crashed down onto the deck and charged the sailors hiding beneath the bulwark. The sailors, untrained and mostly shoremen, were quickly overwhelmed. Only Losley and 1 deputy fought with practiced stances, likely former soldiers, but they were outnumbered. Linn turned from cutting ropes and joined the melee. He wielded Guahir with brutal efficiency. 2 pirates were dead before they knew what hit them. 3 more abandoned their targets and lunged at him, only to be felled in seconds. The blade drank pirate blood with a grim calm. A scream cut through the chaos. Linn spun and saw Losley and his deputy surrounded. Losley lashed out, cleaving 1 attacker, but the deputy bled crimson as a knife slid into his lower back from a pirate to the side. Linn didn't hesitate. He surged forward. "Out of the way!" he barked, and a silver arc opened the neck of a pirate blocking him. The man fell like a broken puppet, but the distance was too great, and the pirate blades around the captain were already falling. For a heartbeat, it looked as if Lossley would be hacked to pieces. Then the ship shuddered. A violent convulsion rippled through the deck. Aside from the Witcher, every sailor, pirate, and dwarf lost their footing and hit the planks. A thick, sucker-covered tentacle burst from the black water and slammed down, crushing a man into a paste and sweeping others away. It ripped through the ring of pirates around Lossley, scattering them like rag dolls. Lossley barely had time to exhale when another tentacle reared and wrapped around his waist. It hauled him toward the gunwale. Linn reached out, fingers stretching, and the captain reached back desperately. Their hands missed by millimeters. Linn watched, helpless, as the monstrous octopus yanked Lossley off the deck and dragged him screaming into the river. Water exploded in a white column. The Witcher's outstretched hand closed on air.